What's up, AP Psych? So here's our last topic for our unit on motivation, emotion, and stress. We're talking about stress, experience, and coping. So this is a big one. We all experience stress in our day-to-day lives, and some of us have experienced more stress than others in terms of traumatic events and things like that. So we're going to discuss, what that can do to your body, but also how you can cope with it and see it as a challenge rather than a negative thing in your life, which we've talked about in the past as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So first, we need to differentiate between stress and stressors. Okay, so a stressor is a stressful stimulus, a condition demanding your adaptation. That's the thing that happens to you, right? It's the stressor that occurs, right? It's your car accident. That's a stressor, right? Opposed to that, you have stress, and that's the actual physical and mental changes that occur in response to your challenging or threatening situation. This is your reaction to it. Okay, so the stressor is the thing that happens to you that then creates your reaction or your stress, if that's the way you look at it. So there's 4 components to our stress response. Kind of similar to our emotion, there's a cognitive appraisal where we identify the threat and determine how we're going to cope with it if we are going to cope with it, right? This is different for everyone. Okay, we all experience things differently. We all have our different perspectives, and we all identify things that may not be stressful to others as stressful to us, or vice versa, right? So people have different experiences of stress, and they handle it differently. They cope differently. Okay? So that's our cognitive appraisal. Then you have the physiological response. This is our body's reaction. Okay? This is when we're talking, our fight or flight, autonomic nervous system, sympathetic nervous system response. Okay? Then you have subjective feelings, our emotions. Like we said with our cognitive appraisal, other people have, people have different emotions in terms of how they respond to stress, whether that be anger, sadness, frustration, depression, things like that, anxiety, whatever stress causes in you. And your behavior, the action you take because of your stress. What do you do about the stress? Do you try to solve the issue? Does it make you shut down? What behavior, what action are you going to take in response to that stressor in your life? So those are the 4 components. So those stress and stressors, it's not merely a stimulus or response. It's a process by which we appraise and cope with the environmental threats and challenges, right? So it's a process that we go through. It's not just one tiny event. When short-lived or taken as a challenge, stress can have positive effects. Okay, so in this process of experiencing stress, if we look at it in the right way and you see it as a challenge, it can be a positive thing, right, in your life, right? It can make you better. But we know that prolonged stress or chronic stress can be harmful to our health. Okay, so we have this stressful event, right? And your appraisal, yikes, this is beyond me, or I've got to apply all I know. Is it a threat or is it a challenge? And that's going to lead to a different response, not only from your body physiologically, but also from your behavior standpoint and your health. So your response, you could be stress to distraction, or you could be aroused and focused, and it depends how you look at stressful events. Okay. So there's several different types of stressors, and these could impact how you can respond to stress. You have catastrophic events, life-changing strains, chronic stressors, and daily hassles. And we'll go through each one here individually, right? On the chronic stress side, catastrophic events side, these are sudden, unexpected, potentially life-threatening experiences or traumas, right? So think of big, major events in your life. They kind of pop up out of nowhere and they cause a heck of a lot of stress, right? Like maybe a major car accident, maybe a natural disaster, a hurricane, an earthquake, a tornado that just turns your life upside down. Maybe you've been in the military, you know someone who is, and they've been in life-changing experiences in the military, or someone in your family was killed or something like that. Those are catastrophic events that you have to deal with on a stressful level. Then you have life changes and strains. And this is life circumstances that create demands to which you must adjust, right? For example, we think of like weddings as positive things, and they are, but they also create stress in people's lives. The planning and the getting ready and the preparing can be stressful life change. Having a child creates a lot of stress for people, and they have to figure out how to react to that, and they have to figure out how to cope to raise this new child in the way that they should. Then, of course, you have maybe you're moving homes, right? Maybe some of you experienced a move, and that's a stressful life change that can make it difficult, and you have to figure out how you want to cope with that. 3, Chronic stressors. These are the things that continue over a long period of time. And these are the things that can be dangerous to your health if you don't handle them. So, you have potentially medical issues by, if you're unemployed for a long time, chronic stress there, medical issues there. If you've experienced a burglary or something like that and you have trauma from that experience, if you travel for work a lot, long distances or things like that, that can be a chronic stressor. These are things that you want to try to solve and figure out so that they don't have negative impacts on your health. And then you have daily hassles. And these are just kind of like daily irritations and pressure and annoyance that might not be significant alone, but they can add up, right? Say you sit in traffic a lot on your way to work and, you kind of develop this stress over road rage or things like that, or you're overwhelmed at work and you feel like, you can't get ahead, you can't keep up, right? That's a daily hassle, but it can become a problem. It could become a chronic stressor if you don't figure it out. Or, you're used to waiting in line at the store or just waiting on people at your job, things like that. These little things that can add up to cause serious stress problems in your life. Okay, so all of this can lead to our body to go into the stress response, right? And Cannon, the same psychologist from the Cannon-Bard theory of emotion, proposed that we have a fast stress response, and this is where fight or flight comes into play, right? This is marked by the outpouring of epinephrine and norepinephrine from our adrenal glands. That adrenaline that gets our heart pumping, increases our respiration rate, mobilizes sugar and fat to give us energy, and cuts away pain so that we can deal with whatever the stressor might be that's affecting us or impacting us right now, right? And if we see stress as a challenge, our fight or flight response for a short period of time is a good thing. Now, that's the short, quick response to stress, our fight or flight response, right? There is a longer lasting, slower stress response, and this goes to our brain structures. Our hypothalamus and our pituitary gland also respond to stress on the slow side. This triggers our outer adrenal glands to secrete something called glucocorticoids. Say that 5 times fast. But we know it better as cortisol, and that's the stress hormone, right? This is just the beginning if the stress is longer lasting. And cortisol is the thing that can cause serious damage to our body in chronic stress situations, right? And that's what we want to try to avoid, right? It's helpful in a short, stressful situation, but if it's a long-term chronic stress issue, it can cause a lot of problems. So this whole stress response is broken down into the general adaptation syndrome. And that is, if we are experiencing long-term stress, you will go through general adaptation syndrome. So according to Hans Selye, stress response to any kind of stimulation is similar, right? We have this similar stress response no matter what we're going through if it is chronic stress. And the stressed individual goes through these 3 phases that we're going to go through each individually. You have an alarm reaction, a resistance phase, and an exhaustion phase, okay? And you can kind of see how that works on this graph. The immediate stressor shakes you up, right? And your resistance dips. But then you have the resistance phase where you're pushing back against it. And eventually, if it's too chronic and lasts too long, you go into exhaustion. So first up, you have the alarm reaction. And this is where your hypothalamus sets off the fight or flight response. And you jump into action. It releases neurotransmitters and hormones to help you deal with the stressful situation. If the stressor persists over a long period of time, this initially adaptive reaction can become distress as it depletes the body's energy and our defense resources. So if we are in a stressful situation for too long, the alarm reaction can actually become a problem, right? Because we don't want to be in a fight or flight for too long, because that's going to be chronic stress, and all of those hormones and those neurotransmitters are going to start to deteriorate our body's energy and our defense resources. It can cause things like high blood pressure, deterioration of our immune system, fatty deposits in our blood vessels, which could eventually lead to heart issues with our heart, ulcers and things like that. Okay, so remember, chronic stress, not a great thing. Okay? Stage 2, though, is resistance. And if our stressor persists, but it's not so strong that it overwhelms the organism during stage 1, it's not so strong that we die in stage 1, the individual begins to rebound during stage 2. And we kind of push back, and we can come back and try to make things better. So outwardly, the body appears to be gaining an advantage and resisting whatever that stressor may be. We're feeling better. We're like, okay, we can do this. We can handle this. Inwardly, though, your body is still working to cope with that stress. So there's still a fight going on inside, but just outwardly, you feel a little bit better. Okay. Resistance only applies to the original stressor. So if another stressor is then introduced, defenses could be so depleted that they may be unable to respond to the second stressor at all, right? And that's something to make a note of, or highlight that. Once you get to the resistance stage, it's only for that original stressor. Once more and more gets piled on, it's going to make it even more difficult to survive this stress situation. So if that continues, eventually, if you haven't resolved the stressful issue by then, you're going to hit exhaustion. And if resistance fails to relieve the stress, like we said, the symptoms of alarm reappear, right? And we dip down again, right? This time, though, it's accompanied by even more powerful autonomic nervous system responses. And the autonomic nervous system overcompensates, and the body has already used so much energy that if the stressor is not removed, exhaustion and even eventually death will occur, right? And that sounds drastic, but it's true, right? When we'll see some examples, and you'll start to recognize that the stressful events can really take a negative physical toll on people if they don't find a way to resolve those things. Usually, before you hit super exhaustion and eventual death, there are some warning signs, right? People have heart attacks, they have clogged arteries, they have excessive colds and flus. If you know someone who's sick all the time, they have frequent headaches. All of these things are warning signs that you're in the exhaustion phase of some type of chronic stress in your life, and you need to get help and you need to try to alleviate it. Okay? And this is the final stage. Okay? Stress and chronic stress can lead to illness. And we talked about that on the last slide a little bit. But any stressor, including mental processes like worry, can affect your health and your body's resources like the immune system. Okay? Your immune system response, which evolved to deal with short-term stressors, may react to chronic stress by breaking down and turning on itself. Your body isn't made to withstand chronic stress over long periods of time. So how is this possible? Well, there's not actually any physical battle for your immune system to fight, but it has been revved up and it feels like it needs to be doing something. So it becomes maladaptive, and your body becomes more vulnerable to infection and injury because your body's fighting itself and it's not fighting off those negative things that could potentially impact your health. Okay, so some health-related consequences, like we talked about. Stress can have a variety of health-related consequences. Persistent stressors and negative emotions can lead you to unhealthy behaviors, for one, which is a negative thing. But it also releases stress hormones. And those chronic stress hormones can lead to heart disease, can suppress your immune system, you get sick more often, and you have autonomic nervous system effects like headaches and hypertension from that high blood pressure because you're constantly in fight or flight mode. Okay. So there's some personality types that lend themselves to high stress. Type A is a term used for competitive, hard-driving, impatient, aggressive, and anger-prone people that become stressed out more quickly in most cases. If you think of that perfectionist in your life, or if you're someone who likes to do things your way and keep things in order and in line, that's a benefit because those people are, tend to be pretty successful and they know what they want in life, but they also have these potentially negative things that can lead to more stress because they like to do things their way and they like to have things done perfectly. Type B people, usually a little bit more relaxed, and they seem to deal with stress easily. They don't get too anxious or worked up about life and things in general, which is a good thing for stress levels, but also can lead to a little bit of laziness and just general lack of care, which isn't always great in terms of life success and pushing through things like stressful events. So personality types can impact the amount of stress you experience as well. So all of those negative things about stress, how do we alleviate stress? So if we want to get stress out of the way before it reaches that chronic stage where we go through the general adaptation syndrome, there's a couple things you can do. There's problem-focused coping, and this is where you attempt to alleviate stress directly by changing the stressor or the way we interact with that stressor. So you're actually trying to solve the problem, right? If your job's causing you stress, you go find a new one, or you have a talk with your boss about your level of expectations, something like that, so you can actually eliminate or change the way the stress is interacting with you or the stressor is interacting with you. If you can't do that, if you can't solve a problem or you don't want to, there's also emotion-focused coping. If you feel you cannot change a stressful situation, you attempt to alleviate it by attending to our own emotional needs. Okay. And some things like this, you're frustrated with your job, so you vent to a friend about the pressure you feel, or distract yourself by doing something you like to get your mind off the situation. Another emotion-focused coping, going to therapy, talking things out, right? That's like venting to your friend. You're not changing the situation, but you're changing the way your emotional reaction to the stressor, and maybe then that will help lessen the stressful situation. Okay, a couple other things. You can cope cognitively, change your thought pattern, like thinking of a stressor as a challenge rather than a threat. We know how important that is. We've seen that video where they talk about people survive stressful events just because they think they can, and people die from stressful events just because they think stress is bad, right? So you have to change your outlook on stress in general. You have your emotions. Knowing you have a support system in place or getting advice, you have people you can talk to, you go see a therapist, you talk to your friends, you vent, things like that. Those are positive emotional ways to cope with stress. You also have behavior, changing your behavior to minimize the impact of stress, okay? Getting better at time management, getting rid of some activities, getting rid of those negative things that you do that could cause stress. You have to evaluate the behavior and what you do on a daily basis and think, am I doing anything that is adding stress to my life? Can I remove those behaviors from my life? And that's a positive way to cope as well. And lastly, you have physical, changing your physical responses. This could include meditation or mindfulness, which we've talked about, and that helps relieve stress if you do it consistently. Finding different hobbies to help you relax. And exercise has shown to be an awesome stress reliever. It helps your body get rid of all that anxious and nervous energy, and you feel great afterwards. Okay. So these are all ways that you can cope with stress. And I encourage you to try them out. If you feel like something is stressing you out significantly, come back here and think about the cognitive, emotional, behavioral, and physical things that you can do to help alleviate that stress or that stressor from your life. Okay. So that was quick, but it wraps up our topic on stress, and it wraps up our unit on motivation, emotion, and stress. We'll talk a little bit about this in class, and let me know if you have any questions.